She mailed fake wedding invitations to my entire family, so I locked her out of my own wedding for 4 hours in 110-degree heat. The gates were padlocked. I could see them from across the parking lot, 100 people in silk gowns and tailored suits, standing on scorching asphalt, fanning themselves with their clutch bags, squinting into the brutal afternoon sun. And right in the center of that sweating, furious crowd was my mother-in-law, Margaret, in her $4,500 champagne Vera Wang, her perfectly set hair slowly wilting in the heat. My phone buzzed in my hand. Her name lit up the screen for the 7th time. I put it face down on the dressing table, picked up my lipstick, and smiled at myself in the mirror. Let me take you back to the beginning, because if I just told you what I did, you'd probably think I was the villain of this story. And I need you to understand, with every single cell in my body, that I am not. My name is Elsa. I'm 29 years old. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment above my uncle's hardware store in a small Rust Belt town where people knew your name, brought you soup when you were sick, and showed up to everything, funerals, birthdays, Tuesday dinners, because that's what family does. We didn't have money, but we had something money has never once been able to buy, and that's the kind of love that actually shows up. Daniel had money. Daniel's family had generational money, the kind with a family crest and a summer house in Maine and opinions about which country clubs were worth belonging to. Daniel himself was nothing like that. He was warm and funny, and he drove 40 minutes every Sunday to have breakfast with my mom just because she made good coffee and he liked the way she laughed. He was the kind of man that made you believe in people again. His mother, Margaret, was the kind of woman that made you stop. The first time I met her, she looked at my hands, not my face, my hands, and then she smiled the specific smile of someone who has already decided everything about you and is simply waiting for you to confirm it. She had the posture of a woman who had never once stood in a grocery store checkout line, and the voice of someone who had spent decades speaking in rooms where everyone listened simply because she was the one speaking. She did not like me. She was not subtle about it. At Daniel's birthday dinner, 8 months into our relationship, she called my hometown quaint the way people say the word unfortunate. She asked what my father did. I told her he'd worked in manufacturing his whole life until the plant closed, and now he drove for a logistics company. She nodded slowly, the way a doctor nods when the test results are worse than expected. How industrious, she said. Daniel squeezed my knee under the table. I smiled so hard my back teeth hurt. When Daniel proposed, in my mom's kitchen, on a random Wednesday, with her cheap sparkling wine and my cousin filming it sideways on his phone, I cried for 20 minutes straight. It was perfect. It was us. And in the back of my mind, even on the happiest night of my life, I already knew Margaret was going to be a problem. I had no idea how big of a problem. Wedding planning with Margaret was its own particular kind of warfare. She had opinions about everything. The venue, too casual. The menu, too ethnic. The flowers, too wild. The guest list, too large. That last one was the battleground we kept returning to. My family is big. I have 3 aunts, 2 uncles, 11 cousins, and a web of family friends who've been around since before I was born. These were the people at every Christmas, every graduation, every hard moment and every celebration. I wasn't getting married without them in the room. Margaret felt differently. A wedding is a curated experience, Elsa, she told me over lunch one afternoon, setting down her fork like she was making a legal argument. Every face in that room tells a story about who you are as a couple. I looked at her across the table and said, very calmly, then my family needs to be there, because they're the story of who I am. She smiled that smile again. She pushed Daniel about it constantly. I know because Daniel told me, looking exhausted and frustrated, that she kept framing my family as a logistical concern. Too many people, too much noise. She wanted a refined ceremony. She'd actually used the phrase social aesthetics in a conversation with her son about my Aunt Linda, who teaches 3rd grade and makes the best peach cobbler I have ever eaten in my life. I told Daniel I wasn't budging. He backed me up completely. My family was on the guest list, full stop, non-negotiable. What I didn't know was that Margaret had simply decided to handle it herself. Kindly follow on-screen instructions for full video.